really important to understand the long-standing history that has brought us to reside on this land. And as a community, it's just so important to protect and honor these people and this place. So, it is my pleasure to introduce Vincent Pacheco. Let's give him a hand. A little bit about our visiting artist. I'm just so happy to have Vincent here tonight. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and it's been really cool to see this exhibition come together. And so Vincent teaches at Sierra College, and he got his MFA from UC Davis in 2017. This exhibition, titled How to Win Friends and Influence People, is a series of paintings and sculptures that documents Pacheco's Chicano upbringing. I just double-checked my pronunciation of your last name and then stumbled right over that again. So Pacheco's sculptural paintings, this is a little snippet from my curatorial statement that's downstairs. So if you haven't read the exhibition statement, that's something that Vincent wrote, and then I wrote the curatorial statement, and it's definitely worth in the space reading that because it can kind of help you contextualize a little bit of what's going on in there. So a little snippet from that. Pacheco's sculptural paintings are not merely a reflection of his upbringing, but also a deep contemplation into what it means to divorce the previous life and family of drug dealers, gangbangers, and the Mexican mafia. This exhibition grapples with his Chicano heritage and searches for new ways to define it. So with that, I'm going to let Vincent say more, and please welcome me, or please welcome me, no, please help me in welcoming Vincent.
Welcome, Molly.
I didn't know I needed it.
Well, first, Molly, thanks so much, and thanks so much to the Fine Arts Department for giving me this space and opportunity to explore here. That's what we all do as artists, right? And it's rare to have a large space like that where work can interact with each other, and new meaning can emerge. Everything's usually just crammed together in your studio. Let me jump into it. I'm just going to go through a little slideshow and some of the events that led me to this work. So yeah, we've all been down there, at least I hope. And yeah, I see each painting / sculpture as a conversation in itself. Each piece is embedded with memory or my own family's oral history. So I see each one as a symbol or an icon in a lot of ways. This is fresh work for me, guys. It's brand new. The paint was literally wet as I drove it over. And with art, you typically sit with it for a bit. I haven't had that opportunity yet, so it's really interesting seeing it again after this time has passed since installation. But to talk about this work, I really have to back up and talk about my family. This is a mugshot of my grandfather, James Pacheco. This is a screen print I did on newsprint, and then we pasted it down in Los Angeles when I was living there. This was from a 17-year sentence at Folsom State Prison in California. He was a drug dealer. He was also a genius. He was a runaway at 6 years old, jumping trains from town to town, involved in a lot of crime, a lot of illegal activity to survive. It's weird talking about him up here in Tahoe, but yeah, he became one of San Francisco's largest drug dealers in the 60s and 70s. And he knew what he was getting into. Like, he was like, I'm just playing cops and robbers. Like, I know I could, go get a job, or I could do my own thing. I could rebel against the system, forge my own path in life. And in a lot of ways, I feel kinship with that, being in the arts. We're all kind of rebels here, right? But that life, it catches up to you. The DEA raided our house, in the Mission District. He got taken away, 17-year sentence. But he had this skill set, he was a drug dealer. that's how he started interacting with the Mexican mafia. We had no ties to the mafia prior to that, um, but through, you know, his drug ring, he quickly advanced up the ranks, and made it all the way up to captain of the Mexican mafia, and got all the benefits and rewards of that kind of status. Um, Eventually, he got stabbed in prison. Like, he got stabbed in the side. He was on the yard. Like, got stabbed in the side. And then I remember this. My dad was telling me this story. He like grabbed the wound, right? And then the dude came back with another shank and went through his hand back into his side again. But in a lot of ways, that was his ticket out of that life, because he went into the hospital, and then eventually got moved to another prison and severed all ties with the mafia and the people he was running with. He got out in '83 and immediately went back into the drug trade. So we sold heroin. My whole family was involved. My dad was a little kid cutting heroin on the kitchen table. We'd package it in balloons and sell it at the front door. And he went right back into it. Didn't last long though. He got out in the '80s, like '83, '84, and it was a different world at that point. It was the Reagan era. There wasn't that sort of honor system in the drug trade anymore, and he actually got robbed in his house, and they tied him up, and he was assassinated in front of his family, in front of my family. Really tough to talk about, but I bring this up because it changed all of our lives. We're still dealing with that collective trauma, the epigenetic trauma, and it's shaped the trajectory of my life, that's for sure. I was only a baby. My dad saw that, and right away, he was like, all right, we got to cut ties with the family. I can't have my kids, in this life anymore. I just saw what happened to my dad. So he moved us out of there, moved us out of San Francisco, and I grew up in the suburbs, and I was able to live a comfortable life in the white suburbs, surrounded by people who didn't look like me. But I was allowed to flourish. I did well in school, played sports, we went camping, stuff the family never did. The rest of the family stayed behind in the Mission District and just kept moving forward with the family business. And they're still there, you know. And I'm on a completely different path. My path led me to corporate America. I had all this, I don't know, energy and aggression and curiosity just from hearing these stories about my family, being disconnected from them. Like, why did we move away? Why do they hate us? Why do we get dirty looks? When I see my family. I always thought about that. And I guess that curiosity about life itself and relationships led me to the arts. I didn't know it at the time, but I think that's why. And they wanted me to get a good job, my parents, so I went, the rational route and went into graphic design. This was the opposite of my last job, and I was the art director at Publicis, which is a global ad agency out of Seattle. And this is the type of work I was doing. These are the brands that I oversaw. And I was making six figures, and I was like the only person in my family making six figures legit. You know what I mean? But like there was always the tug. I'd go show up and do work for Mickey Mouse, and then I'd get a call that somebody got locked up. There was always something bringing me back to that life that I left behind or was torn from in a lot of ways back in the Mission District. It was always present, and something unresolved. I just went into corporate America blindly, was making that cash money, was feeling good about it. My parents loved what I was doing, but there was something unresolved that I don't know, it just never went away. And this is what I look at all day, websites, billboards, etc. And it was a strange contrast, between this life that got the seal of approval, in society, and this life, which didn't. I got really frustrated doing that work quickly. It was creatively stifling. It was soul crushing. Doing work for the rich and the powerful never really resonated with me. I just knew I liked to make stuff, and corporate America came calling and, signing my paychecks. After work, I would do collages, I didn't have any formal training in art. I wasn't exposed to art as a kid. We were in survival mode. We didn't go to art galleries. We didn't go to museums. Um, I knew Photoshop, so I was cutting things out on the daily in Photoshop, assets for websites and whatnot. So I knew how to cut and paste and arrange. So I went home and I started working analog, and I didn't call this art. It was just kind of personal work without logos. Um, and I was just trying to get this out, just trying to calm down a bit. Um, and then I would go back to work, and do stuff with, Ryan Reynolds images and whatnot. And again, it was such a weird reality. Um, and I bring this project up on purpose because, I remember working on this, 10, 12 hours a day, staring at Ryan Reynolds all day long. And I get a call from my brother. It's like, 10 o'clock. I'm eating dinner at the desk. You stay there all day. You're there at like 7 a.m. You're clocking out at like 1, 2 a.m. And it was no different for this project. But yeah, I get a call from my brother, and he's like, hey, dude, I got stabbed in the Mission District. I need you to come home. And so he was with me in the suburbs, but he started working, at radio stations in San Francisco and started reconnecting with the family we had kind of left behind, and was hanging out, and then was seen with the family by rival gangs, and then he got targeted and stabbed 10 times with a Phillips head screwdriver, like in the lips, in the head, on the arms, like all over. Made it out safe. Um, we grew up playing sports. We played football, so he got out of there and ran away and whatnot. And he just needed me to come back home. I was in LA at the time. So I made it back to the Bay Area, saw that he was okay. He still has the scars, but, I had to come back the next day and, work on this Ryan Reynolds project, and deal with an angry project manager for missing that time, you know. It was a weird contrast of worlds. And again, the tug of family was just prevalent and unrelenting, or I'd work on an Acura website. And then I'd see this in the paper, and my uncle got arrested for chasing some guy up 3 flights of stairs with a machete. And I'm like, what is going on back home? I'm just getting pulled back, you know? My family was the good family. We got away from that life. You know what I mean? I went to college. I'm in corporate America. Um, I'm saving for my retirement, I'm almost able to buy a house. Um, and I don't know. It just wasn't stacking up. It's completely different than what my family was going through back home, and it just stuck out to me. Eventually, that conflict, of like reality versus reality, started showing up in the work. By accident. I started referencing the Mission District in my collage work. Um, it wasn't intentional. I always worked intuitively, um, but it started making its presence known. I'm like, okay, so this isn't going away. Feeling displacement like this, a lack of connection like this. Um, it's in my subconscious for sure, and it just kept coming out. Subtly. I was trying to unpack identity. The fracturing of lives, displacement, not knowing the self, not understanding life paths, my family's journey. Um, and it was at that moment, once I started being conscious that, okay, life is now being a part of the work somehow. It's just there, it's present. What I'm thinking about on the daily is now showing up in these collages subtly. I was like, there's a power to this work that we do. I didn't know it. I thought all artists just painted landscapes and it was kind of a mindless activity. That's what I thought. I didn't know anything about art. I didn't know that it could be reflective of what you were going through. And so once I realized that, I quit the corporate job. gave up that cash, and then used all that money to buy a small cabin in the woods. And I live there now, outside of Nevada City, in the Tahoe National Forest. I have like a 500 square foot studio, which is really nice. And I just needed to carve out an area in this world where I could actually sit, uh, think about all of this, unpack it, and then do work. And I didn't know what work was going to arise. I just needed to carve out time and space. I mean, that's what we're all fighting for, right? And luckily, I had that graphic design skill set, and that helped pay for this cabin. But that was my angle, to free up some time. And unexpectedly, I started doing all this work with signage. Um, and I guess it's natural. I mean, when you're plopped into the middle of nowhere, like in the middle of the wilderness, the first thing you try to do as a human being is to kind of assess your surroundings. I thought I was just going to start collaging once I got to that, cabin, but I really needed to focus on, the landscape around me, wayfinding who I was in this location, and I started using, the visual language of the U.S. Forestry Service, and they put up these points of historical interest signs all over the place, and I just kind of co-opted it, and started doing counterfeit signs, plotting my way around the forest. I live in a weird area where it's like there's mining industry, logging, but all those people are gone, and the people around me are newcomers, like myself from the Bay Area, people with their second or third homes up there. So it was hard to tap into any sort of oral history of the place, and I had to kind of define it for myself. So that's what I started doing. I started on my hikes, taking note of everything around me, and also taking note of, who I was in this particular location, what memories were sticking out to me, and I started charting the terrain by memory. So, for example, um, I would make notations, fictional narratives, or I guess they were real narratives, prose that fit along with these sites, right? And just marked my way around this particular forest. And then with this graphic design background that I have, I started putting together kind of a subversive campaign. I put together a website, a social media campaign, launched it without my name on it, attributed it to the U.S. Forestry Service, and yeah, just kind of subversively working. Like, was it important that my name was attached to this anymore? I don't know. So you would click on, each of these boxes. There would be like a 360 video inside of like this cabin, for example, with these, fictional narratives, right? The Chamber of Commerce follows me. The mayor follows me. They think it's real, but it's not real. It is real. It's not real. It's sort of real. But I was really interested in this idea. Like, I'd done all this collage work with materials, markers, paint, and for the first time, I was using experience as material. You know, like, aesthetics really weren't involved in the work anymore. Just the tactility of like daily life, tactility of experience. If I could use that and language, is that art? I don't know, but it was really teaching me who I was in this new place, right? And then I created like a fake map that coincided with all of these locations, but instead of like denoting, okay, the river bends over here, the peak of the mountains over here, there's abandoned cars over there, I started charting my own memories based on this particular landscape, how I interacted with the space, right, with the environment. And it was just a process of, staying curious, um, process of discovery, acknowledgement of experience, and language. You and then galleries come calling, as they do, and how do you bring that experience into a space? Um, so this is like a meditation cabin that I rebuilt in the gallery. And with that was another um, fictional or truthful narrative that coincided with it. And again, like, the cabin is kind of secondary. Aesthetics are secondary. It really is just about experience as material. This is another work, similar concept. This time I had a more active role in sculpture, and I was collecting debris from the forest floor. Um, and I was really interested in this idea of like following these signposts around the forest, right? And having a fake map and a fake website that people would go around and interact with. And I wanted to recreate that experience in a gallery. And I created a little pamphlet, a booklet that went along with it, and had notations of um, each sculpture and where they were in the gallery. And then the coordinates, and then some written language. Um, so, for example, um, this piece with this little red cup is number one, and I'll go ahead and read it. It's like the Bloods and the Crips out here. Um, when you buy your plot of land, the first thing you must do is determine your property boundaries, your territory. When I first arrived, a scout walked my property lines with me. I learned that my territory was marked in red, its borders marked with red spray paint on trees. I couldn't see it at the time, but I was encircled in one continuous line of red paint. In contrast, the property next to mine was marked with blue paint. If you cross into the blue area, the scout told me, that landowner has every legal right to shoot you where you stand. And that was like day one on the property. I'm like, where am I? It kind of feels like the projects in the Mission District, honestly. Um, I thought I was going to find like mystical oneness out there, but it feels just like San Francisco. Um, and I was really just, excited about language. Um, and again, kind of reducing aesthetics, I guess. I don't know. With this project, I started, collecting tree rings that were the same age as I was at the time, and just started notating, certain events in my life, like birth, um, 1989 San Francisco earthquake, etc., familial events, um, just to see the reflection of who I was, in this landscape. Um, and it was also a process of just like distilling down what I was actually trying to say, which is I'm alive. You know what I mean? I come from a place. I'm now in a new place. Um, and I'm changing out here. And really, it just boiled down to me having a 40-year existential crisis. Um, and not only me, my whole family. Like we're still dealing with what happened to my grandfather. You know what I mean? He's still dealing with what happened to his parents. It's like inherited trauma. Um, and I just began questioning through this work of like the growth rings and the forest-related stuff. I was like, dude, what? Well, why are you in the forest? I mean, Mexicans don't belong in the forest. Have you seen another Mexican out here? What are you running from? What are you running to? You know what I mean? Like this is really weird where your life has gone. You're in the middle of the woods in a cabin, surrounded by nobody except for bears and mountain lions and bobcats and whatnot. This is strange. You need therapy. You know what I mean? Um, Luckily, I'm an artist, though. I have that in my back pocket. It's a tool. It's a teacher. It's helpful. Um, but I realized that all this work was just leading back to family. You it's all pointing back in one direction. And they say in like Buddhism, you should be in the now, be in the moment. Um, but I could never get there because there was always something pulling me back to the past. This unresolved um, narrative with my family, experience that my family had gone through, and nobody talks about it. We're all traumatized. We all know when we look at each other what we're all going through, but nobody says a word about that day, about what we've been through, about what we're fighting through, you know. Except for me, like I'm the only one speaking about this, you know. And I started just embracing that, you know. Maybe I'm the storyteller. I'm the one in charge of the narrative. Um, I'm not an author though, you know. I just do art, and I started thinking about that. You know, how could I bring these stories, these narratives to life through work? And I started also recognizing that I'm third generation Mexican American, but I have no idea what it means to be Mexican American or Chicano. I was torn from that family at a young age. I was separated from my family. I was raised in the white suburbs. I went to, you know, a white school. I went to corporate America, which is predominantly white. You know, um, nothing wrong with that, but I was always the odd man out, and that really stood out to me. And I had no connection to my culture. I don't speak Spanish. You know, they wanted to Americanize me as much as possible. Um, I don't know my family, and I don't know what it means to be Mexican. And so this has been a process of not only like studying my family lineage, and my family story, but also simultaneously reaching out and trying to make a connection to my culture for the first time. Um, but just like downstairs, like the work with these piñatas, they're embedded with our own oral history. So, for example, like um, I told you, my brother got stabbed 10 times with a screwdriver, right? Well, now he, you know, walks around with a Glock 9mm all the time because he's traumatized, because he's scared. He doesn't want that to happen again. So this is his gun that I made. You know what I mean? So each one is reflective. These are all the this is all the preliminary research I did when trying to investigate what it means to be Mexican. So I started watching all these old VHS tapes that we had growing up. I really don't know, you know. This is all a process of discovery and research. Here's all the work in a gallery. It was interesting, you know. You make them one by one, you know, and you spend so much time thinking about a single story, a single event, but then when you place them all together, they start communicating, right? All these separate narratives all mean something, you know. It becomes a mashup of a collective experience. And it taught me a lot about, you know, how far we'd come, how far we're lagging behind, um, how displaced I feel. Um, I'm doing more research, you know, into the Mexican culture. You know, this is all basic level stuff, you know, starting from scratch and from what I've known and seen and heard. I'm researching lowrider magazines from like the late 80s, early 90s. And in the back of these, all these young Mexican kids from like East LA or Arizona would submit fan art, and they would publish it at the very back of these lowrider magazines, just black and white drawings and whatnot. And I'm in love with that work, you know, and I want to tap into that era when you know, you would see Mexicans on the big screen, you know, in the media. There was a cultural pride back then, and I want to be a part of that. I'm late in the game, but you know, I'm mimicking that, you know, type of aesthetic, these black and white kind of crude drawings, um, while also injecting, you know, my own family's history in it. And it's, you know, in a lot of ways killing two birds with one stone, like unpacking family stories, narratives, history, and also finding a connection with my culture, my lost ancestry in a lot of ways. And it's helpful, you know. And so all of that, you know, has led up to this work. And again, this is all fresh. This is all new for me. For this work downstairs, I've been really inspired by what you know, I remember from living in Los Angeles. And if you know, if you spend any time down there, there's all these like Mexican markets, and I love the Mexican sign painters that would paint all these products on the sides of buildings. You know what I mean? Always been in love with how beautiful this stuff is. This milk gallon, the Doritos, the Tide. Um, Beautiful work. And so I'm trying to do something similar here. Just kind of referencing that subtly, dipping into that culture a little bit. Seeing how it feels. I'm co-opting a lot here. You know what I mean? But it's me grasping at straws because I don't really know anything about my heritage, except from these familial stories that I heard at the dinner table. Um, and my family was cool. My dad was really open. He was uh, raw, told me the truth. Didn't hold back. I know everything about my family. Um, but yeah, this work has really brought everything to light. Um, Again, while simultaneously helping me tap into something that I never really knew. So I think that's where I'll lead it. I don't know where this is going. I think that's what's exciting about it for me. It's brand new, it's fresh, um, completely different visually than the work I was doing in the forest. But that work kind of resolved. You know what I mean? I understood who I was in that particular place. In that forested landscape. I had an understanding of that, and now my brain has the capacity to start thinking backwards in time. And unpacking larger themes that were never fully resolved. So perhaps one day this work, will come to a conclusion, and I'll move on to something else. This is where my head's at, though, and I'm excited to keep pushing forward. So yeah, thanks for being here, everybody. That's all I got.
So at this point, let's open it up to some questions.
Yeah. Any questions, guys? Yeah.
A specific question about your Granada project. Was there any reason you chose Granada as an example? Was there something that spoke to you about that and personal, or?
There wasn't. No, I don't have. I'm just doing surface level research. And when I was thinking about Mexican American culture, Mexican American craft, that's the first thing my head went to. It wasn't very intellectual of me, I guess, but it was like the first thing I thought of when I was thinking of tapping into Mexican American art making. And how could I contribute something to that? How could I inhabit that? Be a part of a conversation that's been going long before I was here. You know what I mean? So I'm stealing a lot, you know. But like again, I'm just like grasping at straws, trying to find meaning, trying to find connection to something that I don't have. That was the first entry point into this investigation. Yeah, they're empty. They're still empty. Yeah, I like to think they're full of memory, but yeah. And they take up a lot of space, so I don't know what to do with them. Like, yeah, should we break them? Do you hang on to work? I like the mandala paintings where they, throw the sand paintings down the river. I should maybe do that because I'm running out of room, guys. And these paintings downstairs are big. You know what I mean? So, yeah. Yep.
I'm curious why you felt in these sculptures and not just
Yeah, I don't know. Again, this is fresh work. I haven't had time to sit with it, but I was really interested, in the visual weight of these and how they sat in the space, um, took over a space, um, activated a space. There's something that changes, you know, when this moves off of a wall, and I don't know what is changing about it. Um, I don't know. I'm gonna have to sit on that. It's gonna take some time for me to understand. Yeah. Yeah, I do push students to kind of dive deep. Um, a lot of my colleagues, I mean, I teach graphic design. A lot of my colleagues are pushing students straight towards industry, right? Um, I'm against that. You know, I feel like we have more work to do. There's a lot of work you can do with activism, nonprofits, um, things like zines, etc., self-publishing. Um, but it starts with me being open. You know what I mean? They're not going to trust me if I don't share this work with them. You know, so I share my own body of work with my students. I talk about the thoughts that led me to this work. I talk about my history in corporate America, the good and the bad. Um, and then we're on a level playing field, and then we can start building trust. If I'm not vulnerable, then there's no way they're going to be vulnerable. It's just going to be another class. But I'm always pushing them to, unpack notions of identity, inject that into work, and to bring that into every single project that they tackle. Um, Whether it's something like, a protest poster or what have you, um, or a sign project or anything like that. It's vital that we tap into our own experiences. This stuff matters. You know what I mean? This is the language that we all have and can bring out, and it's our responsibility to do so. So that's all I communicate. I don't think it's worth our time to sell, Big Macs. And I say that day one. So I think that helps. It it's a framework, right, for creating work. And every professor is different. They see how I approach work, which is cool. Then they see how another professor, pushes them towards industry. That's the great thing about college is that every professor has their own point of view based on their own experience. So you get a mix, right? I'm anti-corporate America. They see that. They see how graphic design can be wielded as a tool for good, based on my perspective. So far, I'm getting a good response. Getting some, heartfelt work for sure, and work done in earnest. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, it is, interesting. Like, I should be a criminal. I should be an illegal. Um, I should be, a landscaper. I don't know. Um, there is this kind of silly nature to my work. I am playing with stereotypes and blowing them up huge. You know what I mean? But um, I am part criminal. I am part drug dealer. Um, my family did come here illegally. Um, so I have to embrace those stereotypes while also, pointing them out. It's a weird balance. Um, and it's strange because I don't see anybody, outside of like Danny Trejo, in the media that looks like me, sort of. You know, um, So anything I can do to bring light to this culture, whether it's stereotypical or not, I feel like it's my job to do. Um, I hope it doesn't, offend people or bring us down as a culture, and that's where I feel a little subconscious about the work. Um, but I also feel like these are stories that need to be told, whether they're hurtful or not, whether they're stereotypical or not. I prefer presenting a stereotype rather than not being seen at all. You know what I mean? But that's a balancing act for sure. That's a great question. I got to think on that. Yeah.
Talking stereotypes, it's interesting because when you talk about maybe, embracing stereotypes on one end, I also kind of see that I wouldn't say are rejecting those stereotypes, but also finding the other facets of humanity. When you're in the forest, or embracing, stereotypes and idea of a white person or something out in the forest, or, like you said, you felt weird in that, but that may have, I kind of see that maybe that was a form of therapy in itself, so as weird as it may have been at the time and unfamiliar. It's just really interesting how multifaceted a person can be if they step out of their stereotypes. More of a comment than anything.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's a process of observation. I mean, that's what it begins with, right? It's all research. Um, Iconography that you respond to, symbols that you can bring into your work. Yeah, and I mean, I think it's okay to shift up your practice. You know, um, the work I was doing related to the forest, a lot of that derived out of grad school. Um, and I worked on that for like 5 years. It was a steady, process of inquiry. Um, this is a drastic shift, and I do feel self-conscious that it is aesthetically different. You got to stay curious, I suppose, and allow your mind to drift into different areas, different tangents, you know. Yeah, I see myself in all the work, though, for sure.
I'm curious to see if you're interested, or just where maybe the mindset produces this work and the mindset that produces the forest work, what might come out of that, if there's another mindset, human that we have. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm curious too. I mean, it's always evolving, You never know when it's going to reconverge.
again, thanks for your story. I had a lot of people. I'm one of the professors here. Some people know my past history. I have a certain like to me, and your story kind of spans multiple demographics. I have a brother who's stabbed 2 times in the back. He won't leave the house without a gun. He has a serious hesitation to come forward without it. I wonder how you deal with the survivor's guilt. I live here in Tahoe. I lived in Aspen before here. I have the survivor's guilt that I carry forward. Living in a place like this, knowing that I still have friends that are Van Digos, factory gang members, thinking I should go back and try to change something. Do you ever feel that you need to go back and change? Or are you still in that state of flux and trying to find yourself?
Yeah, I deal with that all the time, you know. Um, I have a cousin that's like 1 year younger than me who's locked up for killing somebody. Um, Another cousin a year younger than me that got shot. Um, is brain dead, and like I'm here talking to a bunch of artists, in this beautiful building in Lake Tahoe. I definitely feel guilty about that. Like, why does one person get to move up while somebody else falls behind? Um, I wish I could change something, just like you wish you could change something, but there's nothing you can do. You know what I mean? Except to honor that narrative. I feel like, you know what I mean? so that it doesn't die out. Um, like here's the beacons of light, I think. So there's responsibility that comes with that. You can't just let that dim. I don't think. Yeah, guilt for sure. You know, I'm a professor. That's weird. You know, and my family doesn't like that either. I'm college boy, right? Um, so there's my own guilt imposed upon me from family members. But I wish I could change everything about my family lineage. Then again, like I wouldn't be an artist without that trauma. You know what I mean? I'd be fine probably. I'd be a banker. I'd be a graphic designer. I'd be making six figures again. Saving for my 401k. I'd be fine. It'd be boring though. Yeah.
This is a very sort of nuts and bolts question about your audience, and where whatever it's a designer, you're a art designer, I've done my time as a designer, and right, you're not really expressing your own self, right? Putting it into the feed of the audience that it's designed to do, that they're being the work that you did online, right? I mean, there's sort of a online audience, I guess. For opening up sort of a gallery, what, how did you connect your work into that? I mean, is it something that you just sort of pursue galleries, didn't follow up galleries, didn't the work, or how did that sort of evolve? Developing an audience, developing a series of venues where you can show your work.
Yeah, it kind of happened organically. I mean, a lot of it was through the contacts I made at UC Davis in the MFA program. They have a huge network and a pretty active, art scene in Sacramento. I haven't approached a single gallery. You know what I mean? It's not my goal for the work. My goal is to just do the work. But I have a lot of friends in Sacramento with ties to galleries. I'm getting a lot of invitations through people I know, recommendations. Like I was recommended to show here. I didn't reach out to this space. That's not on my radar. I guess it should be, but it's happening. And it's also not surprising to me the fact that when I get really vulnerable with the work, really honest with the work, that it starts attracting others. You know, when I was working merely with aesthetics and trying to make something on trend, my collage work, nobody was paying me any mind. But when I really started diving deep and asking the bigger questions and approaching the work in earnest, in a genuine way, things started happening. I've never shown this much in my life, and I've never been this raw with my work either. So it's just happening. You know, I have applied to artist residencies though. I think that's been really beneficial. So I actively apply for residencies just to get back to work. You know what I mean? But outside of that, I'm not really trying to be part of the gallery circuit, although it's super nice. You know what I mean? And it helps put the work in new context for sure.
All right, if that's all the questions we've got, let's give another round of applause. Thank you so much. It's truly been a pleasure listening to your talk and having your work in the gallery.
Oh, thanks, guys.
A little bit of housekeeping. We have the Flux exhibition in the Tahoe Gallery. That opening will be April 6th over in the third floor of the library. We will be doing a panel for a few of the alumni that are in that show. So please come to that as well. And stick around because we've got pizza coming. It's a pizza party. That's what we're doing for an after party. So I'm going to disappear for like 5 minutes, go grab some pizza, and then meet you guys down on the first floor. that is called A Guide for a Diverse Art Practice, and that is now on Pictures. And so Vinny, you did collage for that. And so if you're interested in any of those artists, that's available. I just saw it on my Aida feed as I was literally like walking to this, and I was like, oh, it's great. Oh, where are the small world of the arts?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you should pick it up. It's a great book, and she talks a lot about cultural appropriation, our responsibility in terms of diversity, making for a diverse art practice, and changing the art communities we're involved with. I just contributed illustrations to that mostly, but yeah, pick it up if you can.
All right. See you guys downstairs. Thanks again.
Thanks, guys. So weird talking in front of people again.
I mean,
So nervous.
No, you did great.
Okay.
I mean, I think that was such a good mix of like, you got some laughs and then like serious hard-hitting stuff. I think that landed really well.
Okay. Then
Yeah.
bum everybody out. Okay.
No, you bring it. You